Welcome to Sign for More Injury Funding, the podcast for all who want to learn about legal funding and its significance in personal injury, workers' compensation, product liability, medical malpractice, civil litigation, and many other types of law practice domains. I'm your host, Laura, founder and CEO of More Injury Funding, the legal funding counselors with passion for law, medicine, legal funding, and heart for all suffering individuals. More Injury Funding is a sponsor, member, associate, or business partner of this podcast, Georgia Trial Lawyers Association, Academy of Drug Accident Attorneys, Sandy Springs Bar Association, Georgia Association of Paralegals, Atlanta Legal Aid Society, GOL, State Bar of Georgia, St. Andrew Rowing Club, and Georgia Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. In today's episode, I have a special guest, Attorney Craig Goldenfarb, with the law offices of Craig Goldenfarb, PA, also very well known in the local and nationwide community as Goldlaw, based in South Florida, that is a personal injury law firm representing clients who have been injured in car accidents, slip and fall, in instances, nursing home abuse, wrongful death, inadequate security, or any other incident where someone's negligence causes another person to be injured or killed. After a highly successful career as litigator, Craig's primary focus is building the teams that directly manage client cases and overseeing the firm's largest cases. He still oversees pre-suit and litigation matters that involve significant loss, such as catastrophic injury, medical malpractice, and wrongful death cases. Today, we'll dive deep into the topic of KPI, which stands for Key Performance Indicator. KPI can be interchangeably used for progress monitoring, tracking metrics, measuring outcomes, assessing results, and evaluating effectiveness. Welcome to Sign for More Injury Funding podcast, Craig.
Thank you so much, Laura. It's great to be here.
Can you tell us about Goldlaw and how long have you had your firm for?
So I've been practicing law for almost 30 years, since 1995. And I started my own law firm in 2002. So it's 2024 right now. So 22 years I've had my own law firm. I started with one employee, and I now have almost 90 employees and 12 lawyers.
That's mind-blowing. Amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you.
What is KPI and why it is important to cover this topic today?
Well, when I decided to really transform my law firm from a law firm into a business, which was 15 years ago, I had to do a lot of inward searching as to what my identity was going to be. Was I going to continue to identify myself as a lawyer, which is kind of limiting because then you're not really focused on growing your business? Or was I going to try to identify myself and change my identity to that of a businessman? Now, you don't have to be one or the other. You can be somewhere in the middle. But I chose to go full businessman, and I have not handled a case in 15 years. I make sure when I coach lawyers or give my seminars, which I do a lot, that you don't have to be me. If you like handling cases, you have a happy place in your heart for handling cases or talking to clients, then by all means, go to your happy place and get to the point where you're comfortable handling 5 cases or 10 cases or however many cases you want. But if you want to choose the legal path, then if you want to have a business, you have to hire people who are going to be your business people. In the business world, those people are called executives or C-level employees, which would be CEO, COO, CLO, that's Chief Legal Officer. If you've never even heard of these terms before, it means you really haven't been in the business world. And those are the things that I had to learn. So one of the things in business is called a KPI, which is a key performance indicator. And when I talk to lawyers, I ask them to raise their hands in certain circles. And 75% of them have never even heard that term because they don't teach you that term in law school. And you may have never been in a law firm that had any business skills. So you may never have learned that term, but it's very simple to understand. And I use an analogy like as if you owned a store that sold sneakers. And a KPI for a sneaker store would be how many pairs of sneakers are in your store? Well, anyone can understand that, right? I have 100 pairs of sneakers in our store. Concomitantly in a law firm, the similar KPI would be how many cases do you have in your office? So that's the simplest of KPIs. It's just a number or a metric measuring something. So anyone can understand the sneaker analogy. So that's the first lesson in what a KPI is it's a number that measures something. I have probably 1,000 KPIs in my office, and we have hundreds for each department. But if you're going to transform from a law firm into a business, you have to start thinking about measuring things. A real business measures stuff and knows stuff. So it's either going to be you, if you're the full-time entrepreneur and business owner, or it's going to be someone you hire if you want to transform your law firm into a business. So that's what a KPI is.
How do KPIs or key performance indicators help personal injury firms track their success and measure performance?
Well, most parts about a business or the best parts about KPIs is you don't just measure them, but you do something about them. So if you have 100 pairs of sneakers and then you open your store for a week and you count them again, and you've had a lot of customers come in, but you still have 100 pairs of sneakers, that means you have 0 sales. So you need to do something about that. And you need to figure out why you haven't sold any pairs of sneakers in a week. So in a law firm, if you have 100 cases and you go for a year and none of them have settled, it's the same thing. You need to do something about it. So the purpose of having KPIs is not just to have a bunch of numbers on your desk. It's to figure out action items in relationship to those KPIs. And the best business people know which KPIs to measure and then what to do about them, or how to pull different levers or hire different people to affect the KPIs that help your business.
Some common key performance indicators, Craig, that personal injury firms use to evaluate their performance on regular basis.
Well, as I said, I measure 1,000, 2,000 KPIs. So one of the strategies I learned in growing my business is that for the CEO, you need to measure a limited number, because I'm not going to go through 1,000 or 2,000 KPIs every day. So I invented a term called the desert island KPIs. And the reason I invented that term is someone told me, what if you're stuck on a desert island and you only have 2 minutes of cell phone service for your cell phone to work, and someone has to tell you how your business is doing in 2 minutes? What are the top 10 things you need to know about your business so that you can hang up the phone or the cell phone service can go off in 2 minutes, and you do have a full picture of how your business is doing before you die of starvation on your desert island? So in my example, the top 10 KPIs would be pretty easy ones, which is how many cases do we have in our office? How many cases have we settled this year? How much money have we made this year? How much money have we spent this year? How much profit have we made this year? So those are only like 4 or 5 right there. But even with just those 4 and 5, I can hang up the phone and know how my business is doing. And that's only 5. We measure thousands. But those are 5 desert island KPIs that honestly, if I were on the phone on an island and you told me those 5, I could pretty much know whether my business is failing or succeeding. So at the higher levels, it shrinks the number of KPIs you focus on. So I have a big 65-inch TV screen right above my computer monitors, and all it has is my desert island KPIs on it. I stare at that all day because that's a way of me knowing in 1 minute how the firm's doing year to date. And then it boils down by day or by week or by month, so I can further drill down and find out how we're doing today or this week or this month or this quarter. So my beautiful, lovely 65-inch TV screen, which is now my KPI monitor on my computer, is one of the ways I manage this company. And we have 10 of those big TV screens, and they're in each department. So they're on the wall. So we display the KPIs for that department visually on a big screen in each department, just like Google does or any of those big companies. Why? It's not to get people to feel bad. It's that they know how they're being measured and they know what's important to the company. So that's why KPIs are a backbone, an absolute necessary backbone for any company, because if you're all rowing in the same direction and trying to do the same thing, you know how the company is being measured.
Love the system that you came up with. How does your law firm measure outcomes to improve efficiency and effectiveness in your day-to-day operation?
Well, we measure everything, and I will go back to a lovely quote that is often in memes on Instagram, etc., which is, if it gets measured, it gets done. And that's really a great quote, because some things I found that I didn't measure and they weren't getting successfully done. But as soon as I measured it, all of a sudden it got done. So here's an example. You asked, how do law firms measure outcomes to improve efficiency and effectiveness? So I used to not measure 20 years ago whether I made more money on a slip and fall case or on an automobile car crash case. I didn't measure that. So because I didn't measure it, I didn't focus on what I should do about it. And I spend millions of dollars on marketing every year, millions. And I didn't measure it. So 20 years ago, I decided to make a KPI that is average fee per case, average amount of money I earn per case on a car accident versus a slip and fall. My theory, my hypothesis before I measured it, was that I made more money per case on car accidents. Now, what's funny is that most people agree with that hypothesis. And that's why when you look at billboards, wherever you are, most of them say car accident, injured, call us. So what does that mean? It means that most lawyers in the United States think that car accidents make them more money than slip and falls. So I entered this data measuring process with that hypothesis. I was shocked. I realized I made more than 2 times as much money on each case in Florida on slip and fall cases than I did on car accidents. So you asked, how do you measure incomes and do something about it? What did I do? So that's good data, but if you don't do anything about it, then what the hell? Why are you measuring it? I instantly spent another few $100,000 on slip and fall billboards. I instantly filmed 2 slip and fall commercials and started running them. My percentage of slip and fall cases in my office went up from 10% to 30%. And my revenue went up 40% in 1 year, 40% in 1 year. So if I can't give a better example than that as to, if it doesn't get measured, it doesn't get done. And if you measure it and do something about it, it's going to have a positive result for your company. I couldn't believe that I was earning twice as much money on slip and falls as I was on car accidents. So if you want to talk about the importance of KPIs, that's the best example I can give.
That's mind-blowing, truly it is. Can you, Craig, provide examples of specific KPIs that you, as a Goldlaw personal injury law firm business owner, use to evaluate your marketing and client acquisition efforts?
Sure. Your question is some specific KPIs to one department, which is marketing. So marketing is it's kind of easy to measure KPIs in marketing because there's a lot of data, because a lot of it is technological. So KPIs, there's some basic KPIs for marketing and intake. Intake is, of course, your department that takes in new cases. I combine those 2 departments because they're involved. Marketing gets the phone to ring, and intake converts the sales, right? When they call, you want to convert it and get your client to sign the contract. So marketing and intake are together under one roof in my office. So the marketing KPIs could be there's several. One would be how many calls you get for a new case. We call that a lead. Like in business, that's called a lead, L-E-A-D. The second would be, what's a qualified lead? So a qualified lead is a phone call where you want the case. If you get a phone call about a divorce and you don't do divorce law, that's a lead, but it's not a qualified lead. So a qualified lead is a lead where you want the case. So in our industry, since I study KPIs, about 40% of your leads in personal injury should be qualified leads. Because if you get only calls about divorce cases and you're a personal injury firm, 0% are qualified. So it should be about 40%. Now you go from qualified leads to signed cases. So of the qualified leads, let's say it's 40 out of 100 of your leads, how many of those do you sign? Now, perfection would be all 40, right? If you signed up all 40 cases you want, that's perfection. A good standard in our industry is 90%. So if you convert 90% of those 40, which is 36 of them, you're at a gold standard for conversions. And everybody in sales knows these terms, but nobody in law knows these terms. So you got lead, qualified lead, and then completed sales, which in our industry is a signed contract. Our goal is 95%, even though the gold standard for the industry is 90%. We're at 95.2% for this year right now. We're in May of 2024. And we're above our goal, which is 94.7 was our goal, actually. We're at 95.2. So that means that of all the qualified leads we get where we want the case, we successfully sign over 95% of them. These are 3 KPIs, lead, qualified lead, and conversion rate, that not many law firms know what I'm talking about. And those who measure it, it gets worked on and done. So the fact that I measure these things and I have goals and targets for all of these things is like a real business. And what's funny is if you ask any other business, like the sneaker store I was talking about earlier, they know all these things, and that's just sneakers. And their sneakers cost $100. Our law firms, when we charge a client, it's an awful lot more than $100. So why is it that we're not measuring, yet Foot Locker or any store that sells sneakers is measuring these things? Because they're a company. And I am a company, so I need to measure the same things that real companies measure. So I wanted to use those as examples of intake KPIs. And I'll just give you one for marketing. So if you spend $1 million on marketing and you sign up 100 cases, that's $10,000 per case. So that's called the acquisition cost per case. So it's a very simple formula. So in marketing, if you spend $1 million, you signed up 100 cases, it costs you $10,000 a case. So a good marketing KPI is acquisition cost per case. And it's a very simple formula. Divide up the money you spend by marketing for a year, divided by the number of cases you signed up. That's your average acquisition cost per case. Again, I like talking about standards. So in the industry, if you can get below $1,500 per case, that's $1,500, you're in the acceptable zone for a personal injury firm.
Your personal experience, and when you compare, how do other personal injury firms use KPIs to assess the effectiveness of their case management and settlement negotiation processes?
I find that probably 5% of law firms, PI law firms, use KPIs at all. I mean, they know some numbers, like they learn they know what their profit was because they were able to write a check for themselves at the end of the year, right? So they know like 3 KPIs, or that even measure them at all. So the key to having a good KPI system is having the right software. So there's a few software programs, FileVine, Litify, Smart Advocate. These are the top 3, in my opinion, that help you measure the KPIs, because you can set up systems within those case management programs to send you reports automatically. So if you have the right software, you can report them. The problem is that most law firms don't have the right software. They also don't have buy-in from their staff to enter in the data, to put in the work to enter into the data that produces your KPIs. So how are you going to know? It's easy to know how many cases you have, because you can get that from any software program. But how many demand letters went out? Does your CRM produce a document or a report? You have to have a little checkbox that says demand letter went out. And when someone does a demand letter, they have to check the checkbox, or else your report's not going to be accurate. So you have to have buy-in. And in order to get buy-in, you have to have a full law firm or company that understands the importance of data. To get a team like that is a challenge. You got to work at that. So that's why 5% of law firms probably incorporate KPIs as to how they run their company. And that's why 95% of law firms, personal injury law firms, are struggling.
What role do key performance indicators, KPIs, play in measuring client satisfaction and the quality of legal services provided by personal injury firms?
Sure. So your question is, do KPIs come into play in customer satisfaction? So there's a couple of KPIs that specifically apply to customer satisfaction. One of them is Google reviews. We have an incentive program that we put behind Google reviews for our employees. You can give a gift card to a client who leaves a Google review. We have all kinds of different systems set up and scripts set up at different times of the case. So we don't think that when you give them their money is the only time you should ask for a Google review. We have 5 defined happiness points during the case where we ask for a Google review. And we get a ton of Google reviews for our intake department, that they were treated so well at the opening phone call, they actually want to give a Google review complimenting our intake department. So that's what we call a happiness point, which is that they're satisfied they made the right choice of law firm. So we've identified 5 happiness points during the client journey. So client satisfaction is measured in happiness points. And so a Google review is one of many KPIs that has to do with client satisfaction. And in addition, while it's not specifically a KPI, we have in our software, we send out 5 customer surveys during the case at 5 different time periods to ask specific questions about how their experience was thus far in their case. So we also do it at the end of their case. So while the customer survey itself is not a KPI, it's a method of measuring client satisfaction, which we all hate when we get the email from Walmart saying, how was your experience at Walmart today? But if we put a little reward behind it, or if you fill out the survey, we'll give you a $5 Amazon coupon or a Starbucks card. I guess you can call it bribing. You can get information if you give some sort of bribe. So customer satisfaction is tremendously important. And the easiest one to understand is Google reviews. That's a KPI right there.
What advice, Craig, would you give to other personal injury firm owners who use or are thinking about using KPIs to identify areas for improvement and implement strategies to enhance their overall performance?
So the first piece of advice I would give if you're thinking about shifting to KPIs is get out a legal pad and come up with 10 KPIs that you already know. And you just have to write them down. And my first KPIs, I literally wrote on a legal pad. And you know them because they're the 10 things you're actually aware of, which is how many cases do I have in my office? Where are the cases in each department? Like what part of the case are they in? Are they in pre-suit? Are they in litigation? Are they settled? Have you taken a fee? Is it ready to be closed? We have over 40 different phases or statuses in our computer system, but you can think of 5 that I just said as far as where it is. So it's probably easy for anybody listening to this podcast, if they're a personal injury attorney, to come up with 10. And then, even if it's less than 10, and then measure it for 1 quarter. In other words, 3 months. So the advice I would give is start easy. Measure some stuff that you already know for a quarter. And then as you start thinking about this stuff and as you start measuring it, then you should probably think about investing in a CRM, which is a case management software that actually can help you. Now, FileVine, Smart Advocate, and Litify are not cheap. But in my opinion, by far, those are the 3 best in the market. So if you want to invest in any of those programs, do some demos and then bite the bullet and realize that if you want to grow, you're going to have to spend some money. And the first place you're going to have to spend some money is to buy a real software program instead of whatever you're using, which is really old maybe, and get rid of that piece of garbage and get a modern CRM that can help you measure KPIs.
What about Salesforce or Zoho? What about those CRMs? I don't know if you heard of those
sure.
two.
Litify is based on Salesforce. So Salesforce is one of the largest software platforms. So if you buy Litify, it's the most expensive of the 3 because they have to pay for the Salesforce platform. So they charge it through to you. So that's why Litify is on Salesforce. If you're super familiar with Salesforce, which no lawyers are, but if you are, or you have a staff member that's really good at Salesforce, you might want to consider Litify, and Litify is a good program. But Zoho is also an underlying system that's not specific to law firms. So Smart Advocate, Litify, and FileVine are all specific to PI law firms. So that's why I suggest those 3.
Are there any industry benchmarks or best practices for personal injury firms when it comes to setting and achieving KPIs?
There are. So as far as industry benchmarks, so I have FileVine. That's the one I've chosen. And if you do a demo with FileVine, there is a 90-minute demo I did online. And the 90 minutes, I go over my 80 or 100 cards in my KPI computer system. A card is just a graph or a chart. And I have about 80 or 100 on my screen that I can scroll through. I gave a free demo of all of my KPIs. It lasts 90 minutes. And if you get a FileVine salesperson and ask for Craig Goldenfarb's the link to Craig Goldenfarb's free demo. You get it, it's free. And that is, it is 90 minutes. You don't have to watch all of it, but if you can sit through 90 minutes of me showing you on the screen all of my cards and KPIs, I point hundreds of people to that free demo I did. And if you really want to blow your mind as to what are all the KPIs you can measure or should measure, watch that free demo. And again, the software company is called Filevine. Get a salesperson, get a demo, and ask for Craig Goldenfarb's demo he did on his KPIs.
Love it. How do personal injury firms ensure that KPIs they are tracked and aligned with their overall business goals and objectives?
Sure. So KPIs have to match up with your business goals. I mean, if one of your business goals is to make 20% profit for the year, let's just pretend that's a business goal. You have to ensure that your KPIs are all leading to measuring that and to obtaining that. If one of your goals is to have half of your cases be slip and falls and half of them be auto, then you've got to make sure you measure that and that you put marketing dollars and your efforts into obtaining that balance. So whatever gets measured gets done. So whatever your goals are, whether it's a breakdown of type of cases you handle, the size of the case you handle, whether it's big stuff, small stuff, or everything, whether you handle brain injury cases or trucking cases or whatever you want to do, you've got to match up the things you measure with your goals and make sure they're consistent. So it's pretty easy once you figure out your goals, who do you want to be as a company, to create KPIs that adequately reflect what your goals are.
What would you recommend to other personal injury firms for establishing realistic and achievable key performance indicators and targets for them to measure their performance and progress?
Sure, I get asked this question a lot, which is how do you set your goals? Well, it's a two-phase process. The first step is, well, it's a three-phase process. The first is coming up with the KPI. Just like, okay, so for instance, my KPI I came up with in my earlier example was how much money do I make on a car accident versus how much money do I make on a slip and fall. So before I actually set goals as to the average fee I wanted on each, I had to measure it. So phase one is coming up with the KPI. Phase two is the measurement phase. So I don't do anything during the measurement phase other than measure. So I spent a good 3 to 6 months making sure the data was accurate in my computer system so I could have correct data and correct data entry to make sure the data I was getting was right, so that when I was going to act on that data, I made sure there was a measurement period. I chose, I think, between 3 and 6 months to figure out if that was an adequate time period to measure how much I was earning on those two types of cases. So stage one is come up with a KPI, stage two is measure, and stage three is act. So my act that I took, as I said before, was film some slip and fall TV commercials and buy some slip and fall billboards. So measure is the answer to your question. In order to come up with realistic and achievable KPI targets, you got to come up with a KPI and then you got to measure it. And do not do any action until you've measured it.
Your experience, Craig, what challenges may personal injury law firms encounter when implementing KPI tracking and measurement systems?
There are a lot of challenges. And 20 years ago or so, when I started, 15, 20 years ago, when I started measuring KPIs, one of the challenges you're going to get is resistance to change. So if you've been complimenting your paralegal on what a good job she does because she types fast and she's nice, well, those are not KPIs. Types fast and nice are not KPIs. So now you're going to shift and you're going to start talking to your paralegal about how many lawsuits did you file and how quickly did you get a case done. That's very different than you're nice to clients and you type fast. So you're going to face a resistance because your paralegal has been used to being complimented on A and B, and now you're changing it to C and D. So the only way to get that shift is to explain to your staff why you're making this shift, because it's going to lead to success. It's going to lead to continued employment. It's going to lead to me being happier as your boss. It's going to lead to measurable ways of making sure that you know what I expect of you. Because if all you think I expect of you is being nice to the clients and typing fast, it's not a goal. You can't reach a goal. You can't hit a target. But if I say I need 10 lawsuits filed by June, well, then now your paralegal knows I have something to reach. And then the second step is putting some money behind it. So I incentivize my entire company with bonuses based on them hitting their KPIs. And I know that even though it costs me a lot of money, that if they all hit them, I make a 3-to-1 or a 5-to-1 return on the money I paid them. So matching up your KPIs with things that make you money is the key to this whole process.
This fantastic incentive. And again, this was great. I hope, my dear listeners and viewers, today you've learned as much as I did about the power of performance and how using KPIs can help elevate your personal injury practice. But before I let you go, Craig, as promised, I have one pop-up question. You ready?
Sure.
If you had a time machine, what era or time period would you visit and why?
Well, that's a good one. So I was an American history major in high school, and until I decided I might want to be a lawyer, I wanted to be a history teacher. So my favorite period of history was the American Revolutionary War. So I go to Boston and Philadelphia a lot. So my answer is that I would go back to American Revolutionary time in 1770, when the founders started talking about rights and the Constitution, and Hamilton writing his writings on why a constitution made sense, because that was one of the first times in history when human rights were talked about in an advanced level, as opposed to the rights of royalty or king. So the answer to your question is Revolutionary War America.
Love it. And if anyone needs your professional help and is looking for the law offices of Craig Goldenfarb, PA, or Goldlaw in South Florida, how can they reach you? Do you have a website, social media platforms, email, phone numbers?
Sure. I am really easy to find on Google. So lots of ways. The first is just type in Goldlaw. That's the name of my law firm, the trade name. The second is that I purchased a great phone number all across Florida, which is 222-2222. So it's like the easiest phone number to remember. We actually have a slogan tied around it, choose the twos. So we like slogans, we like jingles, we like easy phone numbers. So if you can't remember anything else, my area code is 561. But if you just Google Goldlaw, you can find out all my phone numbers. The third way is actually, I do give a seminar once a year. That's a day. This in April 2025. It's going to be in Orlando. I've done it about 7 years. April 2025. The name of the seminar is 7-Figure Attorney. And if you just simply, we trademarked the name. So if you just Google 7figureattorney.com, that's one word, and it's the number 7 spelled out, 7figureattorney.com. If you type in your email, you'll be on the email list for when we pick a date in Orlando for April 2025. In April 2024, 1 month ago, we did it in Boston. As I said, I love Boston. So we change the city every year. So it's a great seminar on how I run my law firm like a business. A lot of the time is spent by me talking. My chief marketing officer talks for an hour. My chief culture officer talks for an hour. My chief operating officer talks for an hour. And usually we have one guest speaker, and the rest of it is me. It is the only seminar in the United States for personal injury attorneys where you get an under the hood look at one law firm and how one law firm does everything. And I'm very transparent. So we get usually 100 or more lawyers there, law firms from across the country. So if you have any interest, 7figureattorney.com, just get yourself on the email waiting list, and we will email you when we've picked a date.
That was Attorney Craig Goldenfarb with the law offices of Craig Goldenfarb, PA Goldlaw. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you all for listening to our story today. For more tips and tricks on legal funding and personal injury related topics, follow me, download, like, and subscribe to It's Time for More Injury Funding podcast on several podcast platforms, including but not limited to Spotify, Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, iHeart, and others worldwide. And follow More Injury Funding on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Pinterest, YouTube, Google Business Profile, and my website at moreinjuryfunding.com. I can't wait to see you, my dear listeners and viewers, again soon. Until then, be well. Thank you.